Hello everyone, I'm back with another game from the ChessGoals repertoire. This time playing the black side of a ready type setup from white where they do an early knight g3, excuse me, knight f3, g3, bishop g2. So against this we're playing d5 because we're going to try to get our same sort of triangle set up. But this time we let the bishop come out. Now, this game didn't quite follow the move order from the course. It does transpose back, but the course is playing c6 here, and after bishop g2, then bishop g4. But this game transposes back relatively quickly. So here we're already back to the main line of the course, and we're looking to play e5 here, which we do on the very next turn, and castles and knight gf6. And after e4, we're capturing, we're taking back, and we're just putting the bishop down to e7. I think often we don't want to go to c5 because maybe it'll come out to b3 and just kick the bishop away. So queen e1, just trying to unpin. This knight is kind of obnoxious, and he'd really like to add some pressure after this move. And maybe ask us to give up the bishop to try to save this pawn, or tie down the queen in some way. So we castle ourselves, and h3, we drop the bishop back. As I said, we don't really want to give up the bishop. And knight to b3. Knight to b3, I think to me felt somewhat unnatural. I thought it made more sense to put the knight onto c4, but maybe he's afraid of b5. Maybe he wants to just try to hold our bishop out and not allow it to get to c5 itself. But I don't really like this knight b3 idea so much here. So we play queen c7, which I think is the start of a really cool plan. So first we're vacating the d8 square, which will allow us to bring the rook across to the open file. We're also using the queen to protect this sensitive pawn. But after some natural making moves, we have sort of an interesting plan coming up. Bishop to d2. This time this stops us. If we ever want to try to expand with this common b5 idea, this bishop can come in. That can be annoying, especially if we find ourselves with a rook here. So rook f to d8. We're vacating the f8 square, and we need this square for the bishop. We go after knight to h4, he's heading to f5 and going to attack this bishop. We make the really first cool move, knight to e8, and this is quite a weird one. It doesn't really make sense, but our point is that we're going to try to get this bishop back into the game. So after this knight moves, especially when there's no pin, it's not clear what this bishop is really doing. It's going to get kicked with g4, it's going to have to come here, and then it's going to be staring at this pawn. So this idea of knight to e8 is going to allow us to play f6 and bring the bishop out and attack the queen side, which makes a lot of sense, especially since this knight's a bit awkwardly placed there. We're going to have, this knight's going to become a big feature in this game. So knight to f5, we go bishop to f8 because we want to keep our bishop, and g4, I have to drop the bishop back, queen to e2, and now f6, the key idea, where we're going to transfer their play over to the queen side. So king to h1. This is White's idea. As he says, I've already advanced these pawns. Maybe I'll think about continuing and pushing my attack on. And honestly, to me, that seems a bit scary. But we're going to see it's not actually too bad to deal with. He plays knight d6. This is a nice move because it does kind of discourage g5 a little bit because this knight gets a little bit loose, and we get to bring our knight out. Maybe someday we'll bring it out to here, come to this square. Who knows? But then rook g1, continuing on with the plan, and now a5, asking this knight where it wants to go. It can't go to c5 right now. It can't come here. It can't come to this square, and it can't come here. So if we push again, it's going to come all the way back. And if he tries to stop us from pushing, well, now b4 is quite weak. Maybe this will come across and we can break a structure up a little bit. Who knows? So rook ad1. So that way when he's forced to move the knight backwards, he doesn't shut in his own rook. So a4, kicking it, and knight c1. And now bishop to f7, which puts some nice pressure on this pawn. It sort of ties this knight down and makes it difficult to play a move, play the knight to d3. Black chooses knight to take. Knight takes knight. And we take back with the bishop, of course. We can't allow discovery. And then a3. Seemingly, he thinks he's freeing up this knight, but now this pawn structure is pretty difficult to move. He can never advance this pawn. This pawn a3 will immediately fall. Even if this bishop falls away, we can still capture, and the rook is going to be taking. And so if he can't ever move this pawn or this pawn, then this guy is going to be moving kind of on his own too if this pawn ever moves. So we go knight to c5. We're looking at these two squares, which is the big hole in the structure. So going back, we did have an opportunity to play g5. We've actually, in several moves, been able to play g5, and I meant to look at the opportunity here if he wants to play it and keep this knight here. And so he does have the option to play g5 immediately, and he has a lot, but it's always going to look at about the same. We can play bishop to e6, maybe sort of encouraging him to capture or to take because he's worried about now we're threatening to win a pawn. So knight takes. This is maybe going to transpose the line we were just at. Bishop takes. If he takes, we stay back with a knight, and our bishops still look great. Our rooks look good. Both of them are nice. This pawn's pretty strong. And this king looks frankly weaker than ours. This pawn looks weak. This pawn doesn't look great. He's not super happy about having this backwards pawn and these weak squares here. So this is really not something that I think black is all that worried about. So going back to the main line after a3, we play knight to c5, and like I said, we're going to head into one of these squares here. We didn't mean that arrow. Let's try this one. So he plays bishop to b4, and we're not going to let him take it because this knight is going to be fantastic. He does capture and gets rid of our dark square bishop, which we're okay with. It was sort of our bad bishop. If we had to let one go, that's the one we want to let go. So rook takes, queen takes, and he takes control of the file back. That's no problem. We drop right back. Now c3. Seemingly he didn't want us to try to block the file with knight to d4, but this actually is quite a bad move and quite a big weakness because it means this knight is going to be tied to this square for a long time. Notice the rook, which is his only way of contesting the d file, is on a light square. And we have firm control over this b3 square. So after our knight moves, if we're ever able to play bishop to b3, we will kick this rook away and then be able to dominate the file ourselves. And so because of this c3, this knight is going to be stuck here for quite a long time. So we play knight f4, kick the queen, comes back, and now queen to c5. Again, we really are trying to do what we can to play against this knight. He obviously can't play here because this is just terrible. Just dropping a pawn. If instead tries to come to this square, it's even worse. We just trade, and we'll take the pawn anyway. So both of those moves are out. And so bishop to f1. Just trying to get the bishop to be a bit more active. It is staring at the back of a pawn that's not really threatened, so there's not a lot to do there. So we play queen to b6. And this is going to hope to play bishop to d3, and it's defended by the bishop now, but it still doesn't work. If you play knight to d3 now, we have this really great sequence. We have rook to d8, which pins it, and then queen to e3, because where else are you going to go? You can't drop back. I will capture and take on f2 again. So if you play e3, then you play e3, then queen takes e3, doubling these pawns. Bishop to b3, taking advantage of that square. The rook is now stuck here. We drop back, and these pawns are going to fall. This pin is too much to handle. Pieces are going to fall off really soon. So maybe rook f2, so that when we come and pin the knight, the bishop is defended. That's okay. We go bishop a2, and we're going to attack the knight this way. We're going to pick up this pawn. We can start trading pieces, and this weakness, this weakness, this weakness, and this one, this is game over. So he comes up with this idea of playing king to h2. His idea is he doesn't want to be penned behind here. He doesn't want to be in line with the queen, but he also wants to defend this to free up the bishop for movement. So he's going to come to g3 and try to defend both pieces with his king. So we play h5, sort of asking the king if it really wants to come forward, offering to try to open up that position a little bit. King to g3, continuing with the plan. Bishop e6 is a nice move. It just improves the bishop, and it doesn't make a concrete threat, but it does just sort of ask black what move does he want to make. It's really difficult to find any sort of a move at all. For example, you could try to play knight to e2, but after the bishop comes, we kick the rook over, and now we bring the queen up, and it's already really difficult. If you want to say try to trade queens, it's fine. Remember this position, these pawns fell really quickly. I'm not even sure if taking the queen is the best. So that still doesn't work. And so he tries c4. And the idea is that I'm going to bring the knight out through the a2 square and come out to c3, maybe b4. But we play king h7, which is quite a sneaky move here. And after knight e2, we play h4. And the point is that after you take this, we can now play rook to d8. And you can't capture it because it doesn't come with check, and we have this lovely finish here. So that forces king to f3 when we have this check threatening to win the knight. So you have to go knight to c3, and now we win a pawn. If nothing has changed about the position, I mean, okay, so the knight's out, but the knight's still not doing great. It's dominated by all kinds of pawns, and it's blocked by its own pawns there, so it really doesn't have anywhere so great to go. Bishop takes, bishop, queen takes back, and now he tries to infiltrate with his own queen, but this is not going to work. We simply take another pawn. This is now going to become a dangerous passed pawn for sure. It's going to be quite difficult to deal with. He plays queen to f5. We come back to g8. He doesn't have a check thanks to our nice coverage of the light squares here. Rook to d7, coming in for the attack. And just the calm queen f1 threatens mate. So he goes queen to g6, which allows the mate, is what happened in the game. But if he tries to play rook d2 to try to defend against it, this doesn't actually help much. We just give knight g5 check, king e3, we can go h3, and the mate's been defended, but you're just not going to stop this pawn. You can come try for a checkmate, and we can just bravely march on with the pawn, and when it's finally forced, we have this check, and the king comes back to force this queen trade, and now it's quite simple. We're gonna take the queen, we're gonna make a new queen, and yeah, it's lights out. But yeah, the main interesting thing about this game that I think we should try to remember in our games is this idea of activating the queen with f6, or activating our bishop back with f6. So if we go back early in the position, after knight to e8, this plan actually works pretty well even against this knight c4 move. We can still play queen, and then when they come out, we can bring across here. He comes in. We can this time we can even come out to c5. This might probably even better in this situation. After here, we come back, and we can still drop the knight back and play f6 and end up with the same sort of play that we had before. So this idea is really, really cool, and it changes the nature of the game in a way that I think is interesting and fun. Thanks a lot, guys. I hope you enjoy. Bye-bye.